I never thought I'd be abandoned by my own family, but that's exactly what happened the day I retired. Those were the words that echoed in my mind as I watched my daughter-in-law, Alice, drop off her 3 kids at my house without a second thought. It was a quiet morning, just like any other. The birds were chirping outside, the coffee was brewing, and I was preparing myself for a well-deserved break. After decades of hard work, I imagined retirement would be a peaceful chapter in my life. I had been dreaming of leisurely mornings, tending to my garden, and spending time with my family. But I should have known that things weren't going to be that simple. Alice showed up at my door with her usual smile, that fake smile she always wore. "Hi, Mom," she said, almost too cheerfully. "I'm heading out with the girls, and I need you to watch the kids. They'll be fine, won't they?" I stared at her, still processing the situation. "I raised one," she added with a tone that was both dismissive and casual. My heart sank. She wasn't asking, she was telling me. The way she looked at me made it clear. I was her solution to her own inconvenience, and I wasn't even worth a second thought. There was no asking, no discussion, just a cold, indifferent drop-off. And just like that, my dream of relaxation crumbled. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to be pushed aside like an old tool, just because I was no longer working. The kids came rushing in behind her, their loud voices filling the house, but it felt like a void. I had spent years raising children, building a family, pouring my energy into making sure everyone was okay, and now this? This was my reward. 3 kids, no explanation, and no appreciation. As I watched Alice drive away, I felt a sense of emptiness I hadn't known before. It wasn't just the kids that had been dropped off, it was my dignity, my place in the family, my worth. They thought that because I was retired, I was nothing more than a caregiver on call. They didn't even see me as a person anymore. I thought I could trust them. I thought they cared. But all I was to them was an old woman who had nothing else to do but look after their children. "You raised one," Alice had said. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how wrong she was, how much I had sacrificed. But instead, I stayed quiet, standing in the doorway, feeling the weight of her words settle in. She didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a tool, someone she could use when it was convenient. And that hurt more than anything. The house was silent once Alice drove off. The kids were running around, making noise, but the silence inside me was deafening. I had spent years as a mother, nurturing, providing, making sure everyone's needs were met, and now, in my retirement, I was nothing more than a babysitter. I walked into the kitchen, my hands shaking slightly, trying to steady myself. It wasn't just the physical strain that got to me, it was the emotional weight. I couldn't believe how easily Alice had dropped off her kids without a word of gratitude or even a hint of concern. I thought, for a brief moment, maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I was just adjusting to this new phase of my life, and I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about me adjusting to retirement. This was about how my family saw me now, or rather, how they didn't see me at all. The kids were running through the living room, their laughter echoing off the walls. It should have been comforting, but it only reminded me of how alone I felt. I had always been the one to organize everything, to hold the family together, but now, when I needed some time to myself, it felt like nobody cared. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. That was where my husband used to sit. I used to look forward to our morning coffee together, the quiet moments before the chaos of the day began. But now, all I had was silence and the distant sound of my grandchildren running around. I hadn't even heard from my son, Dave, about any of this. Alice hadn't mentioned anything about how long she would be gone or why she was dropping off the kids so suddenly. It was as though they thought I was just there to be used when it was convenient. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Alice's actions didn't add up. She had always been distant, but this was different. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had been taken for granted. It wasn't just this incident. It had been happening for a while, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until I was left with nothing but this empty house and the heavy feeling of neglect. It hurt. It hurt more than I cared to admit. I had sacrificed so much for my family over the years, and now that I was no longer working, it felt like they saw me as disposable. I couldn't help but feel like I had given so much of myself, and now there was nothing left. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I picked it up without looking at the caller ID. "Mom." Dave's voice came through, distant and distracted. Alice told me she dropped the kids off at your place. Yes, she did, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't say how long she'd be gone. She didn't mention it, he said, his voice tinged with annoyance. She's been overwhelmed with work. I'm sure she didn't mean to leave you with them for too long. I could hear the excuse in his voice, the same one I had heard countless times before. Right? I said, feeling my patience wear thin. I understand. Look, Mom, I know it's a lot, but we'll be there soon. Don't worry. The conversation ended without much resolution, just the usual empty promises. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling as I set it down. I had expected more, something that showed I was valued, but it never came. They were so wrapped up in their own lives that they didn't even realize how much I was giving up for them, how much I had given up for them all these years. The truth was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern, and it had been happening for far too long. I sat in the living room, staring at the chaos around me. The kids were running through the house, their loud laughter ringing in my ears, but there was no warmth in it. It only felt like noise, a reminder of how things had changed. I watched them, each of their faces a reflection of their parents, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. My hands were trembling, not from the kids running around, but from the realization of how little control I had left in my life. How did I go from being the heart of this family to being so invisible? I had spent years raising my children, keeping this home together, and now, as soon as I retired, it felt like my purpose had vanished. No one cared to check in. No one asked me how I was adjusting to this new phase in my life. I used to be the one everyone turned to. I had been the one organizing family dinners, making sure birthdays and holidays were special, and offering support when it was needed. But now, I was nothing more than a temporary solution to someone else's problem. I thought about when I first retired. I had big plans. I imagined days filled with quiet mornings, walks through the neighborhood, maybe even taking up a new hobby or spending more time with friends. But instead, here I was, sitting alone, with 3 kids running around my house, feeling more alone than ever. I had worked hard my whole life, and now, at the age of 67, I was supposed to just fade into the background? I had worked hard to build a life for myself and my family. And yet, here I was, reduced to playing the role of unpaid babysitter, all because Alice had decided it was more convenient to drop the kids off than to ask for help. The anger inside me was growing, but I didn't show it. I couldn't. I had learned long ago to keep my feelings in check, to keep the peace, even when it meant swallowing my own frustrations. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't going to just sit quietly and let them walk all over me. I was going to make them see me. I was going to stand up for myself. I walked to the kitchen, feeling the weight of the moment. I needed a plan. I couldn't keep living like this, letting my children and their families treat me like an afterthought. I had raised them, loved them, supported them, and now they were treating me like a burden. I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. I set my coffee mug down, my hands still shaking, but this time, it wasn't from fear or frustration. It was from something else, something that felt like power. The next time Alice dropped off the kids, I wasn't going to just smile and nod. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. It was time to take back control of my life. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying the conversation with Alice over and over in my mind. I had done everything for my family, yet it felt like they had no appreciation for me at all. The anger inside me, which I had been holding back for so long, was slowly building. But this time, I wasn't going to bottle it up anymore. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just the old woman waiting around for the family to remember me. I was still a person. I deserved respect. I took a deep breath as I sat in the living room, watching the kids play. They were loud, rambunctious, and completely unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I had always been the one to care for everyone, to make sure the house was organized, that meals were on the table, that everyone felt loved and supported. But in return, I had been left to take care of their children, without so much as a thank you. The silence was becoming unbearable. I had always prided myself on being strong, on keeping the peace. But now I was tired. I was tired of being taken for granted. I was tired of feeling invisible in my own home. When Alice came to pick up the kids that afternoon, I was ready. I didn't want to yell or cause a scene, but I was going to make her understand that I couldn't keep doing this anymore. As she walked through the door, I stood up and looked her in the eye. Alice, I said, my voice calm but firm. We need to talk. She glanced at me, her usual smile barely reaching her eyes. What's the matter, Mom? Is everything okay? She asked, her tone dripping with feigned concern. Everything's fine, I replied. But I've been thinking a lot about the last few days, and I can't keep doing this. She raised an eyebrow. Doing what? I can't keep taking care of your kids whenever it's convenient for you. I'm not a babysitter, and I'm not a free childcare provider. Alice's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything. I could tell she was starting to get defensive, but I wasn't going to back down. You've been dropping the kids off without so much as a thank you, and I'm done. I didn't raise my children to be treated like this, and I'm certainly not going to let you do it to me. The words came out more easily than I expected, and with them came a wave of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing up for myself. I've given so much of myself to this family, I continued, and I'm not going to let you take advantage of me anymore. She stood there for a moment, completely still, and I saw something flash in her eyes. Was it guilt? But then it was gone, replaced by the familiar coldness I had come to expect from her. Fine, she said, her voice sharp. If that's how you feel. She turned to leave, but before she did, I looked at her one last time. I'm still your mother-in-law, and I still deserve respect, I said, my voice steady. She didn't respond, just grabbed the kids and walked out. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. I was done being the invisible one. I had spent years being the caretaker, but now it was time for me to take care of myself. The next few days felt like a turning point, a shift I had been waiting for without even realizing it. I had stood up for myself, something I had never done before in all the years I had spent being a mother and grandmother. At first, the silence was overwhelming. After Alice left that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. I wasn't sure if it was me or the way she looked at me, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I spent the following morning sitting in the garden, the same one I had tended to for years. The sun was warm on my face, but my mind kept drifting back to the conversation I'd had with Alice. For so long, I had thought that if I just kept doing everything for everyone, they would eventually realize my worth. But now I understood that it wasn't my actions that would make them see me. It was my boundaries. It was my refusal to be walked on anymore. I was more than just a caregiver. I was a person with my own needs, my own desires, and my own right to peace. As the day went on, I found myself feeling a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally being true to myself. The kids were still coming by, but now I wasn't going to be their permanent babysitter. I started saying no. I started setting limits. And while it was difficult at first, I saw the difference in the way they treated me. Dave didn't call as often, but when he did, his tone was different. It wasn't as dismissive, not as casual. I could tell he was starting to realize that I wasn't just going to give in anymore. He asked if I was okay, and this time, I told him the truth. I wasn't just fine, I was struggling. And I needed him to understand that. I can't keep doing this, I told him. I'm not just your mother. I'm not just a grandmother. I'm a person, Dave, and I deserve to be treated with respect. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he spoke. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. I'll talk to Alice. I wasn't sure if he really understood, but it felt good to finally be honest with him. As the week went by, I felt lighter. I had been carrying so much for so long, and now I was beginning to let it go. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice. I wasn't just waiting for someone to come and fix things for me. I was fixing them myself. I was learning to stand up for myself, to say no, to demand the respect I deserved. I wasn't going to let anyone, not Alice, not Dave, not anyone, treat me like I didn't matter. And as I sat on the porch that evening, the sunset painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink, I realized something. I had taken control of my life again. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. The days that followed were a mix of small victories and quiet realizations. I had begun to establish boundaries, something I had never done before, and it felt like a weight was lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't easy, and it didn't come without a few awkward conversations, but I was determined to keep moving forward. Alice hadn't been back since our talk, and honestly, I didn't know how I felt about that. Part of me wanted to be angry, to demand an explanation, but another part of me was relieved. For once, I didn't have to cater to her every whim. For once, I was standing up for myself. Dave had called a few more times since that conversation, but there was something different in the air. His voice wasn't as dismissive, and he seemed to be genuinely concerned about how I was doing. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, trying to keep everyone happy, that I had forgotten what it felt like to make my own happiness a priority. That realization hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much of my life sacrificing for others, and now it was time to focus on myself. The quiet mornings I had once dreamed of were slowly becoming a reality. I took long walks through the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in years. I went to the local cafe and enjoyed a cup of coffee without worrying about what was happening at home. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living. I didn't need to be anyone's caretaker anymore. I was my own person. A week passed, and Alice finally called. Her voice was sharp, almost defensive. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said. I could tell she wasn't calling just to check in. There was something else behind it. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I've been thinking about everything you said," Alice started, her voice faltering just slightly. "I know I haven't been fair to you, and I'm sorry." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hear her say that she understood, that she was sorry for everything. But another part of me didn't want to make it too easy for her. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I want you to understand that this isn't just about one conversation. This is about how I've been treated for years. I can't keep letting it happen." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I know," she finally said, her voice softer now. "I've been selfish, and I've taken you for granted. I'll do better." I wasn't sure if I believed her yet, but I wanted to. I wanted to believe that things could change. "I hope you do," I said. "But you need to understand that I won't just let things go back to the way they were. I need respect, and I won't settle for anything less." Alice's tone softened. "I get it, Mom. I do." "Good," I replied, my voice firm. "We'll see how things go." As the conversation ended, I sat there for a moment, letting the words sink in. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. I wasn't sure if Alice's apology was genuine, but I was learning not to depend on other people's actions to determine my worth. I had spent far too long doing that. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself. And that, I realized, was the most empowering thing I had ever done. The weeks that followed felt like a slow but steady shift. I was becoming more confident, more certain of my worth. I had drawn the line, and while things with Alice were still awkward, there was a noticeable change in the air. She didn't drop off the kids as often, and when she did, she seemed more respectful, more aware of how much I had given up for them. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The more time I spent alone, the more I realized just how much I had let go of myself over the years. I had spent so much of my life taking care of everyone else, making sure the family was happy and healthy, but I had neglected my own happiness. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had sacrificed until now, when I started to focus on my own needs. I spent my mornings with a cup of coffee, reading books I had put off for years. I started walking around the neighborhood, letting the quiet calm my thoughts. And as I spent more time alone, I felt something inside me stirring, something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. The more I reclaimed my time, the more I realized that I wasn't defined by my role as a mother or grandmother. I was more than that. One afternoon, as I was sitting on the porch, enjoying the breeze, Dave called again. His voice was lighter this time, more relaxed, like he wasn't rushing through the conversation. "Hey, Mom," he said. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I've talked to Alice." I felt my heart skip a beat. "And?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She gets it now? I think she finally understands how you feel. She's not going to keep taking you for granted. We're going to do better." I wasn't sure if I believed him, but the sincerity in his voice made me want to. "I hope so, Dave," I said. "I really do. I just need to know that I'm not invisible anymore." "You're not," he assured me. "I see you, Mom. And I'm sorry it took me this long." The words felt good to hear, but I knew they weren't enough. I had spent too many years waiting for people to notice me. I had spent too many years hoping for change without taking action. Now, I was in control of my own life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. A week later, Alice came over to visit. She looked different, softer, almost nervous, as if she wasn't sure how to approach me. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her eyes hesitant. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, gesturing for her to come in. I've been thinking a lot about everything you said, she began. And I'm sorry. I've treated you terribly, and I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted. Her voice was shaky, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Thank you for saying that, I replied. But you need to understand that I'm not just here to help when it's convenient for you. I'm not your personal caretaker. I need to be treated with respect. She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. I get it, Mom. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I didn't know if I could forgive her just yet, but hearing her apology felt like a small step in the right direction. We'll see, I said, my voice steady but firm. Actions speak louder than words. The conversation left me with mixed feelings. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think that things would finally change. But another part of me knew that I couldn't keep waiting for others to change. I had to be the one to make sure I wasn't treated like I didn't matter. It was a lesson I had learned the hard way. As the days passed, I found myself feeling lighter. I wasn't perfect, and I still had a long way to go, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally living life on my own terms. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, or a caretaker. I was Eleanor, and that was enough. The weeks continued to pass, and slowly, things started to settle. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was better than before. Alice had been making more of an effort, calling me more often, asking if I needed anything. There was a shift, a small but significant one, in the way she spoke to me. It wasn't the cold, dismissive tone I had become used to. Instead, there was an underlying tone of respect, maybe even remorse. And though I appreciated the change, a part of me still couldn't shake the feeling that I needed more, that I deserved more. I had spent years doing everything for everyone. I had been the one who kept the family together, who showed up for every birthday, every holiday, every special moment, and now, I was finally realizing how much I had neglected myself in the process. I wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, I had allowed myself to become the background character in my own life. No more. I wasn't going to sit back and let it happen again. I needed to reclaim my life, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It was going to take time, and it was going to take effort, but I was ready. One morning, as I was sitting in the living room, sipping my coffee and enjoying the quiet, I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I almost didn't get up to answer it. But something inside me told me to. When I opened the door, there stood Dave. His expression was unreadable, and for a moment, I wondered what had brought him here. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Can we talk?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and apprehension. We sat down at the kitchen table, and he looked at me, his gaze steady. "I've been thinking about everything," he started. "About how I've treated you, how we've all treated you. And I just want to say that I'm sorry. I know I haven't been there for you the way I should have been." I looked at him, studying his face. There was sincerity in his eyes, but I had been hurt so many times before that I didn't know whether to believe him. "It's not just about saying sorry, Dave," I said softly. "It's about showing it. It's about proving that you actually care, not just with words, but with actions." He nodded, his jaw tightening as if the weight of my words were hitting him. "I know, Mom. I'm not perfect, and I've let you down. But I want to make it right. I want to be there for you, the way you've always been there for me." I felt a lump form in my throat, and I swallowed hard. I had waited so long to hear those words, but even now, they didn't feel like enough. "You have to understand, Dave," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I've given so much of myself to this family. But now it's my turn. I can't keep waiting for you to figure it out. I need to live for myself, too." "I get it, Mom," he said, his voice softer now. "I've been selfish. I see that now. And I promise, I'll do better." It wasn't a perfect apology, and it wasn't the perfect resolution, but it was a start. I wasn't sure if everything was going to change overnight, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't asking for permission to be seen. I was simply demanding it. Later that day, Alice called again. This time, she wasn't apologizing. Instead, she sounded almost relieved. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice sincere, "for standing up for yourself. I know I've been terrible, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted until you said something. I won't keep doing that." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her that words were nice, but actions were what really mattered. But instead, I just said, Thank you for saying that, Alice. But I mean it when I say this. I'm not going to keep letting you walk all over me. I'm not your mate. I'm your mother-in-law, and I deserve respect. She paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, her tone had softened. I know, Mom. I promise I'll do better. And as the conversation ended, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to change. I didn't know what the future held, and I didn't know if this was the beginning of a new chapter or just a temporary shift. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to change. I was taking control of my own life, and that felt like the most important thing I could do for myself.